We've seen a lot of lousy teams in NBA history, but the ones on this list stand out from the pack. You can understand how scary these teams are considering that the recent Brooklyn Nets don't even come close to making the list. What makes those on this list even worse is that none of these teams were in their first NBA season. The expansion franchises fight hard in their first season, but none of them were as bad as these. You don't believe us? We'll give you the list of the 10 worst NBA teams in history to see for yourself. Make sure to stay until the end as you'll be shocked at the top 3 because they really are the worst. 10. 1995-96 Vancouver Grizzlies, 15-67. Unlike other expansion teams, these Grizzlies started with high hopes by winning the first 2 games in franchise history. That included the season opener at Portland, making the Trailblazers the answer to the trivia question, which team allowed both the Cavs and Grizzlies to get the first victory in franchise history on its own home court. As for these particular Grizzlies, the fun didn't last. After opening the season 2-0, they lost 19 straight. Later, they set the NBA record with 23 straight defeats. It got so bad that the 1999 lottery pick Steve Francis refused to play for them, and the franchise eventually relocated to Memphis. 9. 2004-05 Atlanta Hawks, 13-69. When you consider how competitive the Hawks are today, it's hard to remember that current standout Josh Smith played for this 2005 team. So did Antoine Walker, but long after he stopped doing the shimmy dance after hitting 3-pointers for the Celtics. Also on this team was a 42-year-old Kevin Willis, an underrated forward and good person who certainly didn't deserve to end his career this way. Walker eventually was traded back to the Celtics for Gary Payton, who immediately was released and returned to Boston. And in short, these Hawks were a bad mix of aging veterans, undisciplined youth, and perplexing trades. As one team employee quipped at the time, "There is no winning here, only degrees of losing." 8. 1986-87 Los Angeles Clippers, 12-70. NBA legend Elgin Baylor was named the team's general manager before the draft and was rewarded with 0 first-round picks. But the team he inherited shouldn't have been nearly so bad, with players such as Mike Woodson, Michael Cage, Benoit Benjamin, and Larry Drew on the roster. And for a while there was hope, as the Clips won 3 of their first 6 games. But things fell apart quickly as they followed their .500 start by winning just 4 of their next 41. After rebuilding through the draft and remaking the team, and hiring Larry Brown as coach, the Clippers finally made the playoffs in 1992, but not before 10 straight years of at least 50 losses. This group was the worst of them all. 7. 2009-10 New Jersey Nets, 12-70. All anyone will remember about this team are Devin Harris and Brooke Lopez and how they were considered 2 great pieces for the future. Well, that and an unlikely regular season win at eventual Eastern Conference champion Boston. But these Nets also made the record books by becoming the only NBA team to start the season 0-18. They also posted records of 3-40 and 4-48 along the way. Today, the Nets still have Lopez, but the best thing going for them is an eccentric Russian owner and impending move to Brooklyn. 6. 1982-83 Houston Rockets, 14-68. Although the 1983-84 Rockets were accused of tanking games, and later credited with forcing the NBA to create the draft lottery system, this group was even worse, as its 2 best players were a washed-up Calvin Murphy and an even more washed-up Elvin Hayes. Of course, it didn't help that the Rockets lost Moses Malone to Philadelphia, getting Caldwell Jones in the free agency compensation package before the season. The 76ers went on to win the championship. Kobe Bryant's dad, Joe Jellybean Bryant, also played for this team, proving that being a champion has nothing to do with your family tree. 5. 1997-98 Denver Nuggets, 11-71. In the 1993-94 season, the Denver Nuggets were 1 game away from making the Western Conference Finals, but lost Game 7 to Utah. There was excitement about the team's future, but everything would be downhill from there. After the 1995-96 season, Dikembe Mutombo left in free agency and the Nuggets collapsed, finishing 21-61. But the worst was yet to come. In the following offseason, they traded the up-and-coming Antonio McDyess center for future draft picks. They acquired Eric Williams of Boston and Johnny Newman of Milwaukee. Williams led the team in scoring with 19.8 ppg, but played only 4 games as a knee injury ruled him out of the season and the boys struggled without him. The Nuggets started the season 0-12. They won 2 of their next 5 games, but lost 23 in a row after that. With 40 games, it was 2-38, and they seemed to have the worst record in the NBA history. A 16-game losing streak later in the season didn't help. They avoided ending up with the worst record in NBA history by winning 6 of the last 19 games. The next few seasons wouldn't be much better. The Nuggets passed Dirk Nowitzki, Paul Pierce, and Vince Carter in the 1998 draft, and continued playing until the 2003 draft when they picked Carmelo Anthony. 4. 1992-93 Dallas Mavericks, 11-71. While we know the Mavericks today as a relatively well-run organization, they were a joke during the 1990s. They made the playoffs in the 1989-90 season, but didn't return for the next 10 years. The problems began for the Mavericks before the 1991-92 season, as Roy Tarpley was kicked out of the league for his 3rd violation of the league's drug use policy. The 2-time All-Star Fat Lever, acquired in 1990, would struggle mightily with injuries. After a 22-60 season in 1991-92, the Mavs also switched to leading scorer Rolando Blackman in the offseason. The 92-93 season began disastrously. Lever was discarded for the entire season, and the 4th pick in the draft, Jim Jackson, refused to join due to a contract dispute that would continue until March. They started the season 1-15, had 2-30 in 1 point, and had 4-50 record when Jackson finally joined the team. It is safe to say that these Mavs would certainly have ended up with the worst record if he hadn't joined. Jackson helped them win 7 of the last 28 games, including the last 2 of the season, to make sure they wouldn't end up with the worst record in NBA history. This catastrophic season for the Mavs included 3 losing streaks of more than 10 games, with the longest being 19. They finished with the worst point differential in NBA history at negative 15.2 points per game. 3. 2015-16 Philadelphia 76ers, 10-72. While trusting the process finally seemed to have rewarded the 76ers with 2 pillars of the franchise in Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid, the process was painful. Philly went through one of the worst 3-year stretches in NBA history, winning 47 games in 3 seasons, beginning in the 2013-14 and culminating in the horrible 15-16 season. The Sixers' luck began to fall after they traded Andre Iguodala for Andrew Bynum in a 3-team exchange in 2012. Bynum would never play a game for Philly due to injuries. Then, the Sixers began to sink in the 13-14 season by trading Drew Holiday for Nerlens Noel and a 2014 draft pick. Noel would miss the entire season, but his rookie teammate Michael Carter-Williams would win Roy. In 14-15, they recruited Embiid, who wouldn't play an NBA game for his first 2 seasons, and traded Williams for draft selections. Injuries and the exchange of their best players ensured that the next season would be a disaster. Although rookie Jahlil Okafor had a solid season, he started 0-18, which, when combined with a 10-game losing streak from last season, led to a record 28-game losing streak. In addition, they had 2 12-game losing streaks that season and another 13-game losing streak. They secured the 10th victory in their 78th game to ensure they wouldn't end up with the worst record in NBA history. 2. 1972-73 Philadelphia 76ers, 9-73. The Sixers enjoy the dubious distinction of having 2 of the 5 worst seasons in NBA history. Philly won the NBA title in 1967 and set a record of 68 wins in the regular season. Just 6 seasons later, they had the worst season in NBA history. The disappearance of the Sixers that season is easy to explain. Before the 1972-73 season, Hall of Fame coach Jack Ramsey left the team for the Buffalo Braves, and Hall of Fame member Billy Cunningham went to the ABA. They had also changed the All-Star Archie Clark a season earlier. They started the season by losing their first 15 games. A losing streak of 14 games and a losing streak of 20 games meant the Sixers, after 62 games, were 4-58, a winning percentage of .065. A pace that would mean they would finish 5-77. However, surprisingly, they won 5 of their next 7 games, even beating the eventual champions Knicks. The optimism wouldn't last, as they lost their last 13 games to end up with the worst record in an 82-game season in NBA history. However, they would quickly recover from that disappointment and reach 4 NBA Finals and win 1 title in the 10 years following this horrible season. There is hope that the current group of Sixers can follow in their footsteps and return to the top. 1. Charlotte Bobcats 2011-12, 7-59. The Charlotte Bobcats are considered the worst team in NBA history. The 2011-12 Bobcats were simply terrible, and fortunately for them, it was the shortened season with only 66 games. A combination of injuries and lack of talent meant they were completely outclassed, and it should never have come to this. In 2009-10, Larry Brown led the incarnation of the Bobcats' franchise to their first ever winning record and a playoff appearance. Then, Tyson Chandler was traded before the start of the 10-11 season, and Gerald Wallace was traded during the season, with the Bobcats getting marginal players in return. Bob was fired/resigned during the 10-11 season, and the Bobcats eventually missed the playoffs. Top scorer Stephen Jackson was traded for Corey Maggette, and a draft selection before the start of the 11-12 season. They started the season 2-4, but went 5-55 the rest of the way. Maggette only played 32 games due to an injury, and DJ Augustin also lost some time. The 2 players recruited, Kemba Walker and Bismack Biyombo, had decent campaigns as rookies, but nothing spectacular. After the 2-4 start, the Bobcats had a 7-36 record thanks to a 16-game losing streak, but apparently were in no danger of registering the worst record percentage of NBA history. The Bobcats lost their last 23 games to end up with a pitiful .106 winning percentage, just below the 1972-73 Sixers. To their credit, they recovered well from the disaster and made 2 playoff appearances in the next 4 seasons. We hope you guys enjoyed the video. Check out some of these videos on the screen that we're sure you'll love.